I am responding to give this the attention it deserves because, hell yes, if I sound out of breath, it is because I am babysitting my fur nephew and he thinks he's a lap dog. He's like 80-something pounds. You are correct. Yet again, something that Dr. AJ Leonardi was right about. Actually, on Friday, I had sent him this post about something else he was right about. So I love the oh shit wow response. And here was the actual post. And the name of the article is Adaptive Immune Cells Are Necessary for SARS-CoV-2 Induced Pathology. So what does that mean? Okay, so our adaptive immunity is like our T and our B cells. And pathology is the disease process. So immune cell-friendly fire worsens COVID-19. When a pathogen like the SARS-CoV-2 virus invades the human body, the cells of the adaptive immune system spring into action. While B cells produce antibodies that neutralize the virus, CD4 T cells, or helper T cells, release cytokines which are signaling proteins, prompting the CD8 cytotoxic T cells, aka the killer T cells. These cytotoxic T cells hunt down and destroy infected cells. Okay, don't laugh, but I always kind of picture the CD4 T cells as like Batman's butler Alfred, and the cytokines that would be released is kind of like the bat signal, except for Alfred actually pinpoints where Batman needs to go, which cells are infected. Side note, the CD4 and CD8 T cells are able to identify cells that are infected because of MHC1 in most cases, unless, of course, the virus would downregulate MHC1, which would not mark the cell for destruction. But while these immune cells play a crucial role in defending the body from pathogens, they sometimes do more harm than good. Researchers have discovered that immunocompromised mice, which lack B and T cells, fare better when infected with SARS-CoV-2 than mice with healthy immune systems. In the days following infection with a mouse-adapted strain of the virus, animals with intact immune systems suffered dramatic weight loss and severe lung inflammation. Immunocompromised mice, by contrast, exhibited only minor symptoms, even though they carried the same or higher levels of SARS-CoV-2. Interestingly, transferring B and T cells from the blood of immune-competent mice into immunocompromised mice didn't cause the animals to get sicker, suggesting that the resident immune cells, which stick around in tissues like the lungs and therefore weren't transferred, are primarily responsible for driving the disease, likely by increasing inflammation. The researchers note that although immunocompromised mice suffered fewer ill effects, they also struggled to purge the virus from their bodies. Future research could dig deeper into how different immune cells exacerbate harm to hopefully find ways of mitigating their effects on disease severity while preserving their virus-fighting skills. So our antibodies cannot attack cells. They work in the bloodstream, detecting virus before it makes it into a cell. But if virus would make it into a cell, that is what is known as infection. And that's where the T cell squad comes into play. But the T cell squad are trained mercenaries, essentially, with specific targets. And they're given specific jobs, essentially, or differentiation. MHC1 typically takes a piece of the virus that is inside of a cell and puts it on the surface of the cell. Sort of like faxing the target to a mercenary company. Back at headquarters, the CD4 and CD8s train. MHC1 is absolutely necessary for alerting the immune system that that cell needs to be destroyed. Otherwise, that cell is just going to keep on churning out more virus. The SARS-CoV-2 downregulates or suppresses MHC1. So essentially, the virus has taken the cell or the warehouse hostage and is making all of the workers within the warehouse keep producing more virus. And the virus makes a lot of the fax machines stop working. So the information they're getting at headquarters is iffy. Now, I said it's suppressed, it's downregulated. That doesn't mean that it never makes it to the surface. In some events, it can, but our T cells, which have matured in the thymus, are trained assassins, essentially. They are trained to do one thing only, and that is eliminate compromised cells. Now, because some MHC1 makes it to the surface, some fax machines work, the T cells get some information. So Alfred will use the bat signal, the cytokines, but it's not as specific because the information was spotty. So CD4 show up to the roundabout area, in this area with tons of little warehouses, and they even see little packages of virus being exported down the street, but just don't know where it's from. So they know they're in the right place. So the CD4 T cells are getting angry and producing and releasing more and more cytokines. CD8 T cells come out and they say less. I'm locked and loaded, baby. But truth be told, they got a lot of confidence. despite not really knowing where they're aiming. So they're all like, say hello to my little friend. Okay. All of the cells, good, bad, all that. But it's not specialized and causes a lot of damage. Think about this scene from MIB. Healthy cells that have never been infected. So autoimmunity, like the conditions that are resulting after COVID infections, was predicted to occur because it was the logical conclusion of MHC1 being suppressed. The other logical conclusion is that either the T cells will overreact, which is what that article is saying, is that they are the reason for the disease process. It's not necessarily like the virus is doing. They found that the T cells, you had to have T cells for there to be severe disease. They didn't overreact that way, then we would see that there would be persistence of infection. So you see how it is a complete like teeter-totter balancing act there. In 2022, I had made this kind of describing it that the virus is a super antigen, which can deplete up to 20% of our naive T cells each infection. It also suppresses MHC1, so T cell reactions range anywhere from T cells act appropriately to no T cells responding to T cells causing harm. It varies person to person and infection to infection. And here we see Woody, asking, what's my immune response going to be? Because we don't know. Each person's immune response is different, and each infection places its own toll. The part two to that was, that being said, while T cell reactions vary person to person, infection to infection, I'd also wager the more COVID-19 infection one requires, the less likely it is that the T cells respond appropriately in subsequent infections. For C19, gaining long-term immunity via infection is a farce. So here we see AJ saying that scams frauds couldn't even remotely conceive the CD8 T cells would be contributing to harm. And lastly, AJ warned in early 2021, I do not think the T cells will save us. I think T cells exert much of the pathology in this case.